Hello everyone. Continuing the series of Two at a Time, today we are going to start the four-part series related to Civil Services Examination of Mains, wherein I'll discuss the essay paper of 2024. It will have four parts and every part will have two topics. Today being part one of the Civil Services Mains paper of essay, I'll pick up topic 1 of section A and topic 5 from section B. But before I proceed into the discussion, I want to take the opportunity to help you understand that, especially in the year of 2023 and 2024, UPSC had started given again the topics on GS themes. So if you would observe, section A and section B of both these years had mixed kind of topics. You could say that could be easily categorized into semi-philosophical and GS themes. So in the year 2023, we saw topics being asked on gender issues, social injustice, even, education without values kind of theme. And in 2024, in section B, you had social media. So apart from giving direct topics on, exactly GS themes, UPSC has also given us semi-philosophical topics. When I say semi-philosophical, it means that you don't have to deal the topic entirely from your GS understanding, your general studies understanding of the contemporary issues, but you have to also bring in philosophical aspect to it. Okay, so what is recommended is that when you are preparing for essay holistically, whichever themes or topics are overlapping with GS preparation, your general studies preparation, when you prepare GS 1, 2, 3 syllabus, it's recommended that you also prepare it from the perspective of essay. What does it mean? That means that for that particular topic, maybe you're preparing social injustice or social justice for that matter. You're preparing gender issues, you're preparing, issues of vulnerable sections. Do take out few extra time to collect quotes, examples, anecdotes, any book or movie references highlighting that particular issue, so that when you're writing the essay on such topics, you are having good content, you're having a content which is differentiating from others, right? So do prepare it like that and start developing some 1-2 pager notes on certain kind of topics. Okay, usually what I've found is that in the recent years, students don't find philosophical topics difficult, but nowadays many students come to me and tell me that now they are feeling it difficult to deal with GS themes. It's not that they are not able to understand the topic, but they do realize that they don't have sufficient or differentiating content. When I say differentiating content, that means a content or kind of ideas which not everybody is writing, only you are writing, or something which is unique, which is unconventional. So when you don't have such kind of unconventional ideas and content for that particular GS theme, you actually choose to not write it in the exam. So it's better to be prepared. It's better to actually have this in mind that UPSC can again ask such kind of semi-philosophical topics or GS themed topics. Yes, in the year of 2025, we didn't find topics that could be clubbed directly under GS themes. Section A and Section B both had purely philosophical type of topics. Okay, so please keep this in mind, because now we are starting with the discussion of the 2024 paper, and we'll be eventually proceeding to 2023 paper also, and you would find more of such topics. Okay, so whatever ideas I'll be discussing today, wherever you feel that you're not getting it clearly, it's better that you do some Google search on your own. You do some, research over it and develop that content, develop that theory, develop that understanding, make some points, in your copy or on A4 sheets, so that you can again use this theory or use these ideas in different kind of essay topics, right? So let's start the discussion. The first topic, and as I mentioned that the first topic is from section A. So it says forests precede civilizations and deserts follow them, right? forests precede civilizations and deserts follow them. In a way, we do understand that it's a topic which is hinting about that wherever there's a civilization, there is some destruction. Or you could say that with civilization, the innocence of forests is, you could say, turned into the arrogance or the ego of deserts, or you could say the death and destruction represented by deserts. So this again, yes, you could correlate to civilizational theme. You could correlate to even a theme of climate change and biodiversity destruction, or ecosystem destruction. And but you have to also bring in the aspect of the topic from the GS perspective and philosophy perspective. So GS, yes, I said that climate change and environmental destruction, yes, you'll be bringing those ideas, but do not forget to write some philosophy. When you say philosophy, I'll be giving out few ideas where you'll get a clarity that yes, this is where the aspect of philosophy comes in. Okay, so just like this, as you have noticed in the previous sessions also, I have followed a certain framework, certain steps, so that we can decode the topic very nicely, and then we'll have all the ideas and arguments coming into our mind. So what are the keywords? The keywords are forests, civilization, deserts, right? And of course, you have these connecting words preceding and following. So you do understand that what's the sequence. It's not that deserts are coming first, but forests are coming first before civilizations, and then deserts are following them, right? So you have also seen me cultivating, words which is in coherence with the literal meaning of the, or the contextual meaning of the keywords of our topic. So this is the synonym antonym work which I tell my students to do. So actually, forest denotes what? It denotes in the context of this topic. Please understand that forests have a literal meaning. But when I say metaphorical or contextual meaning, forest could mean innocence. Forest could mean, of course, nature, something which is natural and nature-based, something which is in its natural state. And it also could denote abundance, right? Because deserts, so you do understand that there's no, you can't connect abundance and deserts together, but you can connect abundance, fulfillment, abundance, these kind of words with the forest. So yes, innocence, natural state, and abundance, these are the words I could use when I'm talking about forests in my essay. Then for civilization, I have different words which mean the same in the contextual way. So civilization means intellect. Civilization means an artificial state, right? Because when humans started settling down, they became part of civilization, which was not a natural state, it was an artificial state. Okay, so for me, civilization means that use of intellect, use of human intellectual power, and then of course the artificial state. For deserts, I have of course extrapolated to the understanding of decay, absence of morals. Okay, so in a way you need to understand that deserts are somehow not used in a positive way. So it's also very, very important to understand that which keyword is used in which context. Is it having a positive connotation or is it having a negative connotation, right? So deserts, decay, absence of morals is what I am, talking about. Now, you need to, think about that, okay, what are the themes? The themes is, yes, the civilization and anthropocentric destruction. Okay, that's easy to correlate. You can also, whatever ideas you're using over here, you could also relate it to the themes of climate change and environmental destruction. Okay, now when I think about the topic, what ideas come into my mind? So I usually, draw a circle or draw a rectangle like this, and then I start jotting down what different ideas are coming into my mind when I'm having a look at the topic. So when I'm first reading the topic, forests precede civilizations and deserts follow them, what ideas are directly coming into my mind? Yes, this topic means that I don't just have to deal with the environment, but I also need to bring in the moral perspective. So please be careful that whenever you're dealing with such kind of topics, please see the literal meaning and do also check the metaphorical meaning. If you have a direct connection to a GS theme, yes, please cover ideas from that. But if you see that there's a possibility of bringing some philosophical touch, moral touch, spiritual touch, religious touch, please bring those aspects also, right? So I figured out that yes, it's not just about environment, it's about the moral perspective too. Then destruction, barrenness caused by human activity. Because in a way, the civilization is with civilization. Of course, the civilization, the settlements brought by humans, right? So humans are responsible. So this topic is actually, I would say that indirectly is hinting towards the destruction caused by human and humanity in general. So you have this destruction, barrenness caused by human activity, then humans responsible or its natural order. So in a way, my mind also tells me that should I explore this topic just blaming humans, or should I say that maybe this is a cycle which nature follows, that you have abundance, then with over a period of time then comes a state of decay, there is total death, destruction, barrenness, and then again the cycle of birth, rebirth, and you could say abundance starts, right? That's what is happening when you have a land is fallow, then you have ecological succession happening over the period of time. We have read about this, right? So nature has the power to heal herself, but or heal itself, but then it's something that you have to give it time. So is it a natural order, or should we actually blame humans, is what I've tried to give myself a hint. Then of course, what do forests mean otherwise from the literal meaning of forest, collection of trees? It means innocence, it means being connected with nature, it means being in natural state. So for me, forests convey innocence and deserts convey arrogance, or deserts convey death, destruction. It conveys that now everything is lost, right? So that is what I've written. And then because I was thinking about this, then my mind gave me this idea that it could be that I could extrapolate this topic to the understanding of following the cycle of karma, birth and death, right? Birth, death and rebirth, all that kind of from in the nature perspective. I'm not talking from the human rebirth and human reincarnation concept, but I am talking mostly from the nature, from the ecosystem perspective, that we have seen, we have read about the topics of and the concept of ecological succession. So yes, this is what is there, right? Now we will actually, now after thinking about all this, we will now proceed towards the arguments. So if you have been regularly following this series, you do know that my first argument is not always directly jumping to the topic. It's always about setting the context, right? Because I believe in that when you start writing the body content, your initial 2-3 paragraphs should be about that, okay, what is that particular keyword? Or when you extract the essence or theme out of the essay topic, talk more about it rather than directly jumping on that, okay, yes, humans are destroying the forest, and then they are cultivating, or they're settling in civilizations, and that civilization in its advanced state is actually leading to deserts, or you could say in a way, yes, death of morals, death of things. Okay, so for me, my first argument is that I want to talk about how civilization started existing. Okay, so wanderers to settlers, the great transformation. Okay, and to give this argument, I would be picking up few philosophers and thinkers who have given the idea. Now here I do understand that as a student these ideas might not come readily into your mind, but yes, whatever names and theories I'll be talking today, it's better that you do some research, you do some Google search, and you sort of collect all these ideas together at one place. Because whenever you have a topic directly on civilization, directly on human efforts, you can talk about, or directly on themes or topics like that, how humans have come from the evolution part of humanity and humans, you can always bring such theories. So it's not that these theories are just relevant for this topic. If you have an idea, if you have clarity about these concepts, you would also learn how to modify and modulate these concepts to suit in some other topic also, which is of course having the theme of evolution of human or civilizational evolution. Okay, so yes, my first argument talks about wanderers to settlers, the great transformation. And basically, I am trying to deal okay, the hows and whys and the needs of civilization. So how a civilization, got, you could say settled, or why there was a need for developing a civilization. What are the needs of a civilization, right? So I have three, you could say thinkers over here. The first one is V. Gordon Child. Okay. Now, V. Gordon Child has given a theory called as Neolithic Revolution. Okay. And he talks about the Neolithic age. He emphasized the radical, the revolutionary nature. And it is this theory talks about that there has been a marked shift from nomadic hunter-gatherer societies to settled agriculture ones. So during the Neolithic period, Neolithic age, he has given the revolution word because he saw that there was a shift in settlement of humans, the type of settlement of humans, and they had started progressing from nomadic hunter-gatherer societies to settled agricultural ones. So very clear, we all have read this. It's just that we might not have heard of this person's name who have given this theory. Okay, so it's okay. You note down this name. You can, search about Neolithic Revolution. You will have much more ideas with you. Collect that idea because again, you can use it in multiple essay topics. The second, you could say thinker that I've brought in is Arnold Toynbee, and his ideas, his quotes are very, very famous. He has given many quotes on, civilization. So his work centers around, human civilization and evolution part. And then you have what he said is civilization is a creative response to challenges. So he says that what was the need for humans to develop civilization, because it's actually a creative response. We saw that when we were living as nomadic hunter and gatherers, it was very difficult for us to survive. Sometimes the entire tribe was decimated due to, it could be even diseases, it could be due to floods, it could be due to disasters, it could be due to animal attack. So in a way, they realize that when we start living in settlements, when we start, developing, tools and systems wherein large people, are living together, there's a better chance of, survival. So actually, civilization is our creative response to challenges which was, imposed upon humanity and humans by nature or by wildlife or by disasters, right? So he has talked about this, and he means what? That civilizational actually equals material comfort plus moral plus intellectual evolution. So civilization is not just about survival. It is not just about material comfort. It's actually about even your moral, intellectual, spiritual evolution, your progress. Because when you are not fighting wild animals on a daily basis, when you're not having the threat of safety, your mind could focus, the human brain, the human mind can focus on creative aspects, right? And that is why we started developing music, art, and all that evolution is there. So Arnold Toynbee has talked about this. Then of course, each, this kind of discussion is incomplete without taking Yuval Noah Harari's name. So Harari has talked about in Sapiens that this shift to civilization was part of the cognitive revolution. Here it was Neolithic revolution, but Harari has mostly focused on the cognitive revolution, and he believes that humans, started getting settled into civilizations or settlements because they started sharing some myths, some beliefs. So cooperation through shared myths and beliefs is actually what led them to come together, right? And which is what? Psychological and narrative based. So actually it was not, like how this was being portrayed, but he says that cognitive revolution, when it started happening for the humans, there they started believing into some systems, there they started believing, or started having some common belief systems, and that shared myths, that shared beliefs, that shared superstitions, that shared beliefs and systems actually help them have this settlement or have this civilizational progress. So actually it is more psychology and narrative based. That means somebody is telling you that, okay, when you're part of civilization, you get these benefits, this and that. You're not worrying about your safety, your family will be safe there, and you can contribute in agriculture, you can grow your own food, you will start owning land, because otherwise when you were living in the caves and when you're living as nomadic hunters and gatherers, you were not really focused upon owning the resources. But then as part of the civilizational evolution and growth, you started believing in owning. Like there are many, many theories. If you have interest, please read about those theories. Different thinkers, different sociologists, anthropologists have, talked about how human settlements and human civilizations have happened over the centuries and years. And it's a long period. It's not just even century. It's long period. It's an era. So you have to understand that what and why, how things started happening. But if you want to simplify, then this is how I have tried to simplify it for you. So my first argument is talking about the origin or the evolution of civilization with the help of such theories. Okay. Now we come to the second argument, which talks about that yes, what is because the forest. So I don't want to define or decode forest, but I just want to talk about that yes, how the forests were preceding. That means they were existing before humans, and that was a source of resource for the humans and humanity. So earlier, the humans were living in close connection, in close relationship with nature, and because through that it was able to extract benefit. But then when the behavior got extractive, exploitative, we started destructing forests. We started clearing it off for agriculture settlements. We started clearing it off because we wanted the wood and the timber. We started clearing it off because we wanted to do, we wanted to build houses, or maybe it was near a river, so you tend to clear off all the land. So all this became when we started expanding, when we started being exploitative. Otherwise, the relationship between man and nature was usually very it's sort of a close bond, and in a way very spiritual one. Okay, prakriti, you all know that concept. So for the second argument, what I've tried to discuss is that natural resources give base to human civilizations, and that is why forests have been existing before these civilizations. So actually, it's not that the forests are the real, you could say, or the natural ecosystem. The nature is the real owner, the real inhabitant of Earth. We started, encroaching on their, you could say, area or the idea of exploitation happened. So forest existed before civilizations did, and actually it was state of natural harmony. Forests, wild animals, wildlife, every living being, be it plant, be it animal, existing over earth, were living in a state of natural harmony, right? So when you talk about this, okay, just a moment. When you talk about this, so it's state of natural harmony which was existing. And you could actually use this phrase very nicely. Please note it down in your copy. Forests were humanity's first home, civilization its constructed one. So actually the humans were earlier dwelling in forests in a very natural way, and still we have primitive tribal groups, right? We have PVTGs, we have so many tribal groups still living in consonance with nature, living in correlation with nature, natural laws and all. And they are still yes, they are using the resources, but they're not very greedy or exploitive about that. So forests were humanity's first home, and civilizations its constructed one. So in a way, the civilization is the artificial state of existence for humans. Okay, so forests symbolize the primordial balance, that is nature functioning without human interference, governed by natural laws. Everything lives in close relationship, everything lives in symbiotic kind of relationship. It's not parasitism, it's not other kind of thing, but it's more like symbiotic, that they are mutually benefiting each other. So everything was actually living in symbiosis, in a symbiotic relationship, and without human interference, all the natural laws, all the existence of, you could say, forests and animals and every living being was happening in the way of symbiosis. So this is what the nature was all about. So forest preceding, this argument is dealing with that phrase which says forest precedes civilizations, because we have to first establish that nature is actually in a natural state. We have developed civilization which is an artificial state, right? So talk about forest and the forest relationship and what and how it was existing, right? And all the natural the laws were being followed, and every living being, be it plants, animals, every type of species was actually living in close symbiotic nature. And that is why you have your food web and food pyramid kind of concepts. So Rousseau argued that early humans living close to nature were purer and freer, and they were not corrupted by greed. So he called them noble savage. So savage is actually, somebody who's not cultured, who's not civilized, right? A savage person, that's how you call it. But then Rousseau has actually given a concept of a noble savage who was maybe uncultured, uncivilized from our perspective, but was more noble in its deeds. How? Because it was having, a close nature, a close relationship to nature, and they were more pure and free in their soul, in their existence. So actually, the savage people who we term it as uncultured, uncivilized, not worthy to be called as humans and all, they were actually more noble because they were purer by heart, they were purer in existence, they were living in a free way in relationship with nature, in close bond with nature. So Rousseau has given this, and to justify all this you can actually give examples. You have read about a lot of primitive tribal groups, particularly vulnerable tribal groups, also primitive tribal groups, so you can talk about that. You have examples of Dongaria Khons who who worship their Nyangiri hills, right? Then you have even in New Zealand you have one tribe, Maori, right? And Maori and other tribes of New Zealand, they treat all these even rivers, they treat as living entity, living beings. So they worship, and they treat every part of nature as having its individual entity and individual, you could say, living being status is giving to them. So there's actually a very famous river which is called as Wanganui River, and Wanganui River is actually has been given a status of living entity. If you remember, few years back there was this, I think Supreme Court or some court had actually even tried to give Ganga Yamuna as the living being status, but I don't know what happened with that, in a way, because if you're giving that kind of status you have to really put in a lot of stringent laws and all. But we Indians, how do we treat our rivers, we all know that. So but there Wanganui River actually was given a status of living entity, and in this way it has its own rights, like whatever just like human rights are being enforced, or human justice is ensured. Similarly, the rights of the natural things in environment, there people have started doing that. So Maori example is there. Then you have Dongaria Khons is there. You have Bishnoi example, very common cliched examples of Bishnoi, but yes, very relevant actually, I would say. So you've got so many examples of tribal groups who are still living in India, and of course even other areas across all over the world, where they're still living in close harmony with nature. They don't use or extract nature in a bad way. They are just living, of course they use resources, but they try and compensate. They don't use it for their greed, they use it for their own survival. So in a way Rousseau has talked about noble savage actually, and this talks about that how human beings actually were earlier living in close relationship, were actually purer and freer, but then civilizations have led to humans being exploitative, greedy, and basically a bad person. So that is there. Then to deal with civilization, yes, our first argument was talking about the evolution of civilization, but with the third argument I want to focus about that how the civilization, the human evolution, human civilizational progress has more been about the progress of ego. So it's about development and development and development, and not thinking that what is the end point of this development. Why are we developing so much? What do we want? So that exploitation and that ego which is attached to the name of progress and development or civilizational evolution is what is killing us, is what is killing us, killing our nature. So humans have tendency to destroy what sustains them. So there are many thinkers and many philosophers who have talked about that there's an inherent destructive nature of humans, wherein they tend to destroy everything which sustains them. So they have a tendency to destroy what sustains them, and it boils down to ego, alienation, plus illusion of mastery over nature. You've got various theories with different terminologies and all, but there is a very clear, I would say, debate between two schools of thought. One is called as environmental determinism. Okay, environmental determinism versus possibilism. Now this is what usually in geography optional you read about this these concepts given out by thinkers. It, in simple words, it means that when you say the term environmental determinism, it says that environment is determining everything. How human is going to survive, how your agriculture, your food system, your culture would look like. So in a way, environment and nature are influencing the lifestyle, influencing the food habits, influencing the culture, influencing how humans will be living in a particular area. Okay, that is environmental determinism. That means environment and nature is above everything, above human beings, right? And human beings have no control. Then there's another school of thought which is just opposite to it, which is called as possibilism. Now, as the name suggests, possibilism, it simply means that everything is possible, because humans, by the usage of their intellectual power, by the usage of, their, you could say, innovative and creativity, can win over nature. So nowadays, yes, we are seeing we are able to survive in Arctic. We have Antarctic, we have research stations in Antarctica. We have, research stations on the North Pole also. We are surviving in deserts. The entire city of Dubai and many cities of, actually, for that matter, Saudi Arabia and UAE are settled on deserts. Saudi Arabia was building a long city called as the Wall or something. So in a way, we are, and that was what possibilism was, that humans can, and of course we are trying to, go to Mars. We are trying to even colonize Mars, in the near future. So all that, was the concept of possibilism. So in a way, yes, but don't you think so? It's being exaggerated a lot. And yes, it's good to have human ingenuity and intellectual power and creativity and innovation power also, but at what cost are we doing all of this? So we need to strike a balance, and that is why here human civilization is, it's all about ego. It's ego alienation. Alienation from what? You're alienating and isolating yourself from nature, from your natural state of being, right? And illusion of mastery over nature. So possibilism, is the theory which has sort of motivated humanity to keep on inventing, innovating, discovering, creating new things which maybe we don't even need. Okay, so that is that there. And then you have different thinkers justifying this also. So Rousseau says that man in his state of nature is peaceful, but civilization, or the need, the desire for civilizational growth, introduced greed and domination. So if you take a single man, if you leave it in, in the forest or in the nature, he would feel, or she would feel, very happy. But then that is why, Rousseau said that man in his own state of nature is a very peaceful being. He would just take something which, he needs. He's not going to act greedy. But the competition, the feeling of living in a civilization, the feeling of, competing with other human beings, has sort of turned man into a greedy person. So this greed and domination has been because of civilization, and he has sought ownership. This is mine, which has led to alienation and isolation. So the competition, the ego, the process of sort of exerting dominance and owning something, the quality of, owning something, the, you could say, the attitude of ownership rights, is what has made us greedy and very, very exploitative. So Rousseau has said this. Then you have Francis Bacon, who has talked about that. In a way, he has talked about the different, you could say, theory, but same with possibilism. So Francis Bacon was actually a symbol of scientific revolution, and he was very happy. He was, supporting humans, that yes, when, they are using their intellectual power, they can do everything. So everything is possible if humans put their mind to it. So he was a symbol of scientific revolution. He followed the philosophy of empiricism, and he, of course, believed in science, and he believed in legitimizing exploitation. But please remember, don't judge Francis Bacon from 21st century perspective. He was existing, years back and decades back. So maybe at that point of time, it was about, because maybe you had plagues and you had so much of diseases and all. And then people were sort of, they just wanted to feel safe, feel happy, feel that they have life, on their hands. They'll be living a long life. So maybe at that point of time, that's why scientific discoveries, with antibiotics and this and that and all that, with, revolutions in medical, you could say, health system, all that was, of course, very appreciative. So scientists of certain era, certain century, were very happy because they were able to, minimize death. They were able to minimize loss. They were able to, assure people that they can have a good life. So in a way, yes, but we have sort of taken it over to a, you could say, to an extreme end. Actually, that's the problem. Okay, so Francis Bacon was talking about this. Then Karl Marx has said that, and Karl Marx mostly talking about the capitalism and socialism kind of concept. So he has, said that capitalism alienates humans from nature by turning ecological resources as commodities. So he has tried to blame capitalism, that the capitalist state or the capitalist economy, the capitalist system would always focus on turning resources into commodities, turning resources into ownership kind of stuff, and it's always going to make humans greedy and exploitative. So it alienates humans from nature because it always treats the resources, the natural resources available, as commodities. So in a way, every thinker has a different idea, and they have given the different concept, but you have to bring in that, yes, most actually here you will not be justifying the good part of it, but because the topic expects you to actually talk about from the negative perspective of the civilization efforts and all, so you have to sort of bring in that how humans have been in the disguise of civilizational growth and evolution is sort of creating a nature which is poison, turning poisonous for us. The air, the water is turning poisonous for us, right? Earlier it was exhilarating it for our spirit, it was giving us life. Now it is extracting life. So that is something that you have to talk about. You can end this argument with this particular thing, that this particular phrase, which is very nice. Again, you can note it down. When progress becomes a god, nature becomes its sacrifice. So if you're focusing on progress, if you're turning this the progress and evolution as a subject of ego, competition, right? So then when progress becomes your god, nature will of course becomes its sacrifice, because you have to sacrifice something to please your god. So that is why nature becomes the sacrifice. Okay, so this is how you can actually turn your third argument into discussion. Now the fourth argument is, of course, that we have to bring in, we have to discuss the aspect of that how deserts are following the civilizational. So forests precede and deserts follow them. So you cannot ignore the aspect of deserts, that yes, till a certain point of time we were progressing, because of we were able to maybe increase lifespan of humans. We were able to develop or make our life so easy and all that, right? Because of the human intellectual and because of the civilizational progress. But then most of the civilizations, advanced civilizations even earlier, have seen this, that at an advanced state they usually starts decaying. So the aftermath, the death, destruction, barrenness, which is of course conveyed by deserts. So when you start believing that humans are the center of the universe, they are the center of all existence, then you start treating yourself as god, then you start turning every resource into a commodity, you start being exploitative and greedy. So a psychological distance forces humans, a psychological distance forces humans to over exploit. So this psychological distance is from nature. So a psychological distance from the nature, from the actual, forest, will, help you or will turn you into a person, will actually where you start over exploiting. You don't see it from your own eyes, that how your over consumerism is leading to destruction in the natural ecosystem, in the nature, in the how forests are getting destructed. Humans settled and built civilization, but of course they did deforestation, they of course for the farming, for urbanization, for expansion. But over the time, nature's self-sustaining systems were exhausted. So it was not that nature did not have self-healing powers. It had, but then after a point of time, there was a point of no return, where the self-sustaining systems of the nature were sort of exhausted. So you see that when you leave a fallow land, or when you leave a land for a longer period of time, nature again takes control, and then you start getting like the small herbs and shrubs, and all that start getting the animals here, and also the small animals come in. So all that is there, but nowadays it has been exhausted, it has been like exploited so much, that now self-sustaining, that self-feedback mechanism is now absent in nature, and the nature is not able to heal itself naturally. So humans have settled and built civilization, and over the time, nature's self-sustaining systems were exhausted because of this, overdoing of such things, right? Every civilization starts with reverence for nature, rises with mastery over it, and then declines through hubris and overreach. So in a way, that's the nature of every civilization. Everywhere we have seen, even in in the ancient civilizations, they have done this, that they started with reverence for nature. They started worshipping fire god and wind god and sun god and all that. Most of the the ancient civilizations, you will find gods which are connected with nature. Even you have forest god, all that concepts are there. But then the exploitation starts, because humans tend to think that we are superior to nature, and they can master over it. And then the decline starts happening when you start over exploiting, overreaching your potential, or I would say not potential but your limitation actually. So when you start thinking that humans are above everything, they are the center of all existence, then where the deserts and the death and destruction and the barrenness starts happening. So you don't have to just connect it to the sand wala concept of desert, but deserts could also be concrete and moral and spiritual deserts. So you could also again extrapolate your desert understanding, the word of desert, to concrete deserts. That means, yes, we are living in a concrete jungle. So you could say, again, using the same inspiration, concrete deserts. You could also say moral and spiritual deserts, where we are so much alienated from our innate peaceful nature. We are so much, you could say, away from our bond with the nature, that Prakriti and Prakriti wala concept, right? And that is what we are living in deserts right now. And desert is not just filled with sand, but it's the moral and spiritual lack also, leading us to the feeling of deserts. Okay, so that's your you could say four set of major arguments and discussions that you could write in the body content. Now there's no counter argument to this topic. Yes, if you remember in the themes and the essence, I talked about that, is it a natural order, or is it in influenced or made by, brought in by humans only? So in a way, yes, you could talk about, bring it a spiritual perspective, that nature does have its own cycle of birth and deaths happening over the period of time. But then it has been that cycle, that natural cycle has been disturbed because of the humans. But there could not be exactly a counter argument, because the topic is framed in a way. So this also tells us that not every essay topic has a possibility of counter argument. Okay, so be careful with that, because sometimes people and students, they tend to have a fixed framework in their mind that I have to compulsory write a counter argument. No, you need to check that if the topic gives you the possibility of a counter argument or not. If the topic doesn't give you the possibility, do see that if there isn't any parallel perspective or any other perspective which can be fitted in, but not exactly as a counter argument, right? So you could bring in these, the natural cycle of, births and deaths, that something can be done, but not as a very great counter argument. Now here we will discuss the introduction and conclusion. So in the same line of to maintain the coherency, in the conclusion, because you have talked about that how forests are preceding civilizations and how civilizations are destroying, and why this is happening, why, how we have already discussed that. Yes, when you're living in sync, but when it's more of greed, exploitation, the capitalist system as said by Karl Marx and all. So when you bring those, and the possibilism concept that I talked about, so when you bring those theories, you start justifying each and every part of the essay topic. But towards the conclusion, you have to talk about the balance. Now please understand, for most of such kind of topics where the problem is with human desire or greed, or that kind of exploitative nature, you can't just bring us back to zero, or you can't force the entire humanity civilization to go back to caves. You can't do that. What best we can do is that we have to strike a balance. So we need to bring in the concept of balance in our life. We need to avoid extremes, because extremes is where now it is not possible. Can you live without your phone for 1 year or so? Maybe one day you can, but for an entire year, no, it's difficult. So in a way, you have to understand that now it's not possible for us to turn into cavemen, but we need to start developing the concept of and including the concept of balance in our lives. So Prakriti and Purusha has to be in balance with each other. And in a way, you could actually use the question like, what if? So if, what if civilizational growth or civilizational the growth by humans is not balanced? So in a way, in a sarcastic way, I have written this: can anything stop humans? Now we have also started building cities in deserts. Are we having lack of land or lack of places to settle down, that we also want to develop cities into deserts, where there will be a lot of air conditioning, where there'll be, you have to do a lot of things, you have to put a lot of systems in place to just make that place livable. right, for the humans. So in a way you're sort of over exploiting the resources available to you, just because you want to show, or you want to satisfy the ego that yes, everything is possible, and man is beyond the grasp of nature, or man is way beyond in superior to nature. So that kind of cautionary or sarcastic thing aspect you could discuss over here. And then you have to again bring back the balance wala aspect, that yes, don't lose middle path, you have to strike a balance. Civilizations die from suicide, not murder. It's a very famous quote. If you remember, we discussed Arnold Toynbee's concept, right? So he has given many ideas, many quotes on civilization, and this is one of his very famous quote, that civilizations die from suicide, not murder. That means not an external factor will come and kill a civilization, and it has happened with even empires also. It's usually that the big empires, the big civilizations, the most famous civilizations have been, destructed because it was the internal factors which was working against the sustenance. So actually, civilizations die from suicide and not from somebody coming, and not from the external factors. That's what the point is, right? And then you have also one more, sorry, you have also one more quote. So nature does not hurry, yet everything is accomplished. So in a way, when you're talking about the balance, you can bring this famous quote of Lao Tzu, and you can talk about that yes, nature does not hurry, yet everything has its own timing. Every flower is blooming in its own season. Everything is happened as per its own sweet timing. But we as humans are always in a hurry, and in this hurry we are sort of destroying our nature. So nature does not hurry, yet everything is accomplished. And you can draw a comparison that, but humans tend to hurry into everything, and yet they are not accomplishing anything. There's no stopping their to their desires and needs, right? So through that, you can end your conclusion. You can write the ideas. Coming to the introduction story. So usually you have two methods for this topic, I would say. One is of course taking references from history. So you can take up references of the old civilizations. You have two examples over here. One is from Mesopotamia, one is the Mayan civilization. So Mesopotamia was actually it was thriving between the Tigris and the Euphrates river, okay, if you have heard of it, right? And it sort of saw its downfall because of the excessive deforestation, over irrigation, and salinization led to it turning into desert. Okay. Similarly, the Mayan civilization, it has been said that large scale deforestation for agriculture led to drought, and of course, drought led to societal collapse because people, were dying and all that. So, in a way, the entire both these civilizations have collapsed. I could not write the entire story. Please search about it. Okay. Develop a story so that you can write it as an introduction in 2 to 3 paragraphs. So what happened with Mesopotamian civilization? You could actually develop a nice story that okay, how they they started flourishing, what was happening, and then how their downfall started, what exactly happened, what was happening with over irrigation and salinization and all that. Then also with the Mayan civilization example, both these can be used as your introduction. You can even both bring them together. You can bring write them as single example also, single introduction example also, that's fine. Or you can do a not as a contrast, but maybe taking reference from the past civilizations. So history based example is there. The second way of introducing this particular topic could be through contemporary understanding. So when I say contemporary understanding, people who are good with current affairs, people who are good with framing and creative news headlines, please develop that kind of idea of writing an introduction. So you can bring in any news headlines which is talking about the relentless Amazon rainforest destruction which is happening, and you could talk about how the Aral Sea basin has shrunk. Aral Sea has been a previous year question in UPSC prelims, so you could bring that Amazon rainforest destruction, Aral Sea basin destruction. The there is Sahara, of course, Sahara desert, and then you have the Sahel region. So now Sahara is actually Sahara desert is actually expanding. So the Sahel region, which was actually a fertile region, now has started facing the issues of, you could say desertification and loss of, soil fertility and all. So in a way, all these news framed as news headlines, you have to be creative. You have to give a creative touch and write them as news headlines. So in a way, you could also start your essay with the contemporary touch in introduction. Okay. So this wraps up the discussion for topic 1. I hope you got good points. I hope you understood how to frame the arguments. There's one simple suggestion that whenever you get these kind of topics, please don't frame just three arguments that, okay, let me discuss forest and let me discuss civilization, let me discuss, deserts, but develop interlinkages between them. That, okay, how forests, turned into civilization, how civilizations are now turning into deserts, or what, what was the need to have such kind of civilizational growth. Was it our need, was it our want, was it, our desire and, over exploitation or the greed factor? So, develop the discussion in such a way that your essay should not look pockets of, discussing some concept, but it should look coherent, it should look come together, it should look that it's a holistic essay written about the topic, right? So use ideas which act as good transitions, use ideas and concepts which act as, good connections between when you're moving from one major argument to another. Okay, so in that way your essay would look more coherent and properly structured. Now let's move on to the topic 2, or I would say section B, topic 5. Okay, social media one. Now again, this was a topic which is, of course, it's not something which is difficult to understand, but then, the real challenge was, and many students who wrote this topic in the actual exam, the mains appearing students of 2024, they realized that this topic was easy, but they did not have proper content, they did not have, you could say, adequate and nice content to be able to do justice to the topic. So because, whenever you have a contemporary topic, it would always require you to bring the examples, bring some theories, bring some, reports, surveys. And usually you would find that whenever you're dealing with a GS topic, you need to have some data sets, you need to have reports and surveys, you need to have, thinkers, new age thinkers and experts talking about what is happening. You need to have a lot of differentiated content to be able to do justice to some kind of topics. And that is why many students, they literally either do not attempt this topic and they choose to write philosophical topic, or if they attempt, then they make a mistake that they do not have the adequate content, and that is why they tend to sort of do a shoddy job with it, a superficial job, and then they get the less scores. Okay, so I'll just start the discussion in a few seconds. I'm just taking a water break, and meanwhile, please do the brainstorming on your own. Think after all, because it's an old topic, so do think from the perspective that now you know that this topic has already come in the paper. What would you be writing about? Do you have any current examples, some more relevant examples, some examples from social media, influencer examples, all that kind of? So do the brainstorming and then we will start the discussion. Just give me a few seconds. Right. So yes, the topic or the theme is social media, but it has given as a long topic, right? Where each and every word is very, very important. So social media is triggering fear of missing out amongst the youth, precipitating depression and loneliness. So we get many, many keywords, right? Social media, fear of missing out, depression, loneliness. But you have to see that there is a sequence. It's saying social media is first triggering fear of missing out amongst the youth. So that means this topic is again focusing on youth. It's not even talking about all the societal, members, children, old age, middle age, but it's targeting mostly the youth. So you have to be very specific that how social media is impacting youth, young people, and not old people or women specifically, right? So you have to be very, very careful when you're decoding the topic. And then it says that now this fear of missing out is precipitating depression and loneliness. So there is a sequence. You can't just randomly start talking about depression, loneliness. You have to say, you have to analyze first that how social media is leading to the fear of missing out, and that fear of missing out is actually leading to people becoming isolated, being lonely, feeling, the aspects of like feeling depressed and all, right? So yes, we have seen the keywords. The theme also, clearly social media. There's also theme of youth. There's also, you could say, a nice theme which is contemporary challenges of the world. Because, or you could say the first world problems. Okay, in a way, not exactly in a demeaning way, but you could, when you're developing content, you need to have these kind of keywords in your mind. So whenever you have a contemporary challenges of the world, one of course is social media, one of course we have consumer culture and all. So develop content, one is of course threat of AI. So also have this kind of theme in your mind, because you could get a topic wherein you could bring all these ideas which fall under this theme. Okay, so this is how you prepare the topics, so that you are, whatever ideas and content that you're generating, you're collecting, it becomes useful to be applied over a large variety of different topics too. Okay, now when I think about the topic, what ideas are coming into my mind now, because the topic is so straightforward. It's not that it is some cryptic or some very metaphorical meaning is attached to it. It's very clearly saying that the theme is social media, and you have to talk about that it is creating aspect of fear of missing out in the youth, which is ultimately leading to depression and loneliness, right? But still, I would like to do this theme in essence kind of brainstorming, that what other ideas I could think about. So yes, I could I could think that, yes, is it happening for the first time in history? That means this, the problem of social media. Now, please understand, there's a very famous reel sometimes, and like some videos and all, which talk about that every generation has their own problem. So, our parents' generation, where, the TV was still not there, Doordarshan was still not, there. And when I'm speaking parents, so of course I'm speaking of my parents. I think your parents already had TV, right, in their childhood. So, in a way, you could understand that from my parents' perspective, their obsession was with radio. I still remember my mother was telling me that there used to be some, 10 o'clock in the night, there used to be some broadcast from, Sri Lanka, Ceylon radio, right? And I'm not sure it was exactly broadcasted, or it was termed as, some Sri Lankan radio and all. And they used to tune to it, and they used to, listen to it, hiding from their parents. My mom used to do it actually. So in a way, every generation had its own Achilles heel, or had its own maybe weak point, which acted as the a center of obsession, or you could say as as something which was maybe could had the potential to deeply impact them, and maybe impact them in a negative way also, right? So our previous generations had radio, some had TV, and then cable TV, and dish TV and all that, and that obsession with watching TVs and all, right? That was, I think, with my generation when I was growing up. And if you have to study for a test, you can't see. And usually you used to get those new movies, pirated movies coming on the night. The cable wala would be showing, the cable network would be showing you that. And that there was no OTT culture during my childhood. And now you have social media, you have smartphone addiction and all, right? So I think every generation has something going on. It's just that sometimes certain tools might become point of so much negativity, and they are literally influencing youth in a way that it is beyond their control. Now, listening to the radio for half an hour or watching the TV for few hours might still be something which was not could be termed as something which was leading to depression and loneliness for either my generation or the previous generations. But yes, social media, this usage of apps and all, this kind of thing is literally playing with our mental health. The TVs and radios were not. But in a way, this is a very nice, discussion, that every generation has their own Achilles heel. That means one weak point has always been there. Okay. And for some, children of, where TV and radios both were not so, then it was cricket or it was game, right? So every generation has their own set of addictions and addiction points, I would say. It's just that maybe those were not so harmful. They were not impacting our mental health nowadays, just like how the social media is doing to us, right? So is it happening for the first time in history? No. So you can, also bring in this concept, bring in this idea. That's not that, this social media tool is, the first thing to happen to us. There have been other tools like radio, TV, where the parents were again objecting to, to their over usage. But then, yes, social media has, sort of crossed the line, has crossed the barrier. Then you have new age parenting. You can, because the concept is about depression and loneliness, you can also bring in the concept of, sorry, you can also not bring in the concept of, you can also discuss from the perspective of how new age parenting needs to be very careful about how to deal with depression and loneliness, in their children, in their, especially the youth, or I would say children belonging to teenage years. So of course, our digital life, the discussion could be digital life Comparison culture, because yes, fear of missing out. So why it is happening? Because of the comparison culture, the materialistic, and then we are connecting to disconnect from everything. So in a way, disconnecting to connect and connecting to disconnect. So actually social media is giving us an illusion that we are connecting to a lot of people, but actually we are getting disconnected from the real life interactions, from meaningful conversations, from even meaningful relationships, right? So we have to now disconnect to connect. So disconnect, and then you can establish the reconnection with the actual people around you, and so that you feel normal. Okay, so in a way, these ideas I thought about, and that's why I've jotted it down. Now let's start the real discussion, in the sense that let's focus on the arguments. And my first argument would always be, again, as you know, setting the context. But here I'm just not bothered. I would say I'm just not only bothered or worried about setting the context, but here through this first argument, I want to also give you some theories and concepts, so that you see that how the social media has evolved over the years. Whatever I have written in this particular, slide and the next slide is not exactly part of the proper essay, because I'll not be elaborating so many ideas as part of my first argument. You could just actually summarize whatever you learn over here and write as 2-3 paragraphs. But with this topic, like with this, discussion, I wanted to also give you the concept of evolution of social media, so that any other topic you have or any place else, you can use that, how you can actually track the phases of evolution. It was not that when the social media was launched, it was bad from the initial part itself. If it was so bad, then it would have not been, sustained itself. The governments would have banned it. But then there have been phases of evolution, and now from something which was good, which was appreciative, which is being appreciated earlier, it has turned into a demon or a monster now, which is actually being exploitative, right? So my first argument, of course, would be but about social media. So just talk about, what is social media, define it, explain it. If you don't have a proper definition, no problem. Simply explain what is meant by social media, give examples of some apps and all, differentiate that, what is called by social media, where you can share, your text and photos and all that, right? So social media, my first argument is evolution and its present form. So Pew Research Center defines social media as digital tools that allow people to communicate, share content, and interact with others online, right? So this is a proper definition for social media. You can please note it down. It's not necessary to exactly define it in your essay, but in your essay, just explain that, okay, if you're saying social media, so as a term, what exactly, it is meant by that, right? Then you need to focus on the evolution. Here I'm giving you a detailed concept of evolution of social media, but you have to summarize this in 2 paragraphs. So you will not write in so much detail, because I don't want the first argument to become so detailed that it gives the impression to the evaluator that you have sort of deviated from the topic. No, it's just that you have to set the context. So whatever we'll be discussing in the 4 phases of evolution, you just have to bring it, like summarize it in maybe maximum 2 paragraphs, okay, as your discussion beneath the first argument. So let's start with evolution. So what was the phase 1? The phase 1 of social media was the era of connection. So it actually started, and whenever you're dealing with such kind of concept, please don't start thinking from Indian perspective. Usually, whenever a technology starts getting developed, India is usually at the very later end, it's actually receiving it. So in a way, social media, or these kind of you could say chats and connecting with people had started earlier. It's just that in India it came out a little late, I would say, not very late, but a little late. So the first era of connection, the first phase, it was around from 2000 to 2010. Okay, so the focus was on building communities, sharing identity, democratize the communication. Okay, and then you have which social media apps? You had Orkut, Twitter, now we call it as X. Now earlier it was called as Twitter, and then MySpace, right? So you have, and many of your, maybe I think the older siblings, you would they would have used Orkut. You would have heard, before Facebook there was Orkut. So even I have used Orkut in my college. So in a way it was popular, and basically the first phase is about that people wanted to connect, people wanted to communicate, people wanted to use a platform where voicing opinion or connecting to people wasn't difficult. And of course, it included chats and being real, being present in the moment. It's not about drafting an email and sending it over where, you're not seeing the person's, face or voice and all that. But yes, chat was very real time. Like you could chat on Orkut, and also you could chat and, you could put up pictures, right? And then building communities. So community in the sense that, community of like-minded people. I want to build a community who is, into collection of coins. I want to build a community, my interest in, maybe just reading the works of Charlotte Bronte, or maybe, some classical fiction novels only. So building communities of like-minded people, and that was the aim. That, and you, of course, connecting from all over the world. That was the aim, like, converting word into a global village kind of thing. And then of course democratized communication. So it broke what? It broke geographical barriers, and that was the point. While sitting in India, you could chat with any other person in real time using Orkut. So it of course broke geographical barriers. It fueled political and social movements. So actually, if you remember in the initial, this particular phase, you had many movements which were fueled, which were, you could say, got aggravated because of the social media backlash. Okay. And during that time, please understand, like, so many years back, you need to understand what kind of scenario was there. Sometimes during those years, it was still that the news, even the news was coming, like the news that you see on the news channels on the TV might report something, which has happened maybe 24, 48 hours earlier. So even the reporting through the news channels was sometimes, delayed or late. But with Orkut and all, it was very, like with these kind of social media apps, it was very instantaneous. It was very, and I think Facebook was already launched. It was just that Indian people were not using Facebook at that point of time. But I think 2005 later and all, Facebook had started, like people were connecting over it. We were using Orkut, I think post 2009 or something. Then we had Facebook also. So then people started migrating from Orkut to, Facebook. So, but yes, this is how the evolution is there. That means because I've mentioned the timeline, so you could mention Facebook, but Facebook was very, very new. Like it was just a child. It was a baby which had, got born during that time. So Orkut was its granddad kind of stuff. So that's how you understand it, right? So fueled political and social movements. So your Arab Spring, like, it got spread. The news of Arab Spring got spread as a wildfire because of, the presence of such social media apps and social media platforms. Basically, more than apps, I want to call it platforms actually, because it wasn't really apps. So you have social media platforms like that, and, even Occupy Wall Street. So that was the first phase. Now, second phase was that the era of algorithmic amplification. So post 2010 to till 2016, now they started turning that social media platforms into, like, the coding and all that was through algorithms. So algorithmic amplification, that means you are now engaging people who want to see you. So actually engagement turns into monetization. So YouTube and all, now YouTube again, was, I think, was launched in this phase only, but again it, it gained a lot of, you could say, people seeing it, and, all that in post 2010. So there, this engagement means the kind of followers that you have, the people who are following. Now you could start monetizing it. You could now actually make money out of it. You could assert that, yes, I have a community of so many, followers who follow me, who listen to me, which was a big thing. You placed in any, country, and you have followers from all across the world, a person sitting in USA or a person sitting in India, and you have somebody, seeing from USA, seeing from Europe your videos, and, knowing about your opinions and all that, was something which was very unique for that, particular phase. So engagement turns into monetization. Algorithms began optimizing for engagement, not well-being. So now the algorithms, they started understanding this. They started showing more of, like, for example, if you would see maybe car racing videos, so then the algorithm will start showing. And see, please understand that what I'm, you already understand what is algorithm and all. I'm just trying to paint a picture, so many years back. So when, maybe you start seeing car videos, when you start seeing food blogs and all, food blogging and all, so then more videos will start coming, because then, they wanted to understand that, okay, what is your interest? Sometimes they would have asked you through surveys and all that, okay, you open the app and there were surveys that, okay, what kind of content you want to see, what kind of music you want to listen to. So they had already figured out your interest, and they would show more of it. And the moment you know opt out or you search for something else, then they'll start showing more of that kind of video. Maybe first you were into car racing, F1 racing, and then then you shifted to maybe food blogs, then you shifted to maybe travel into Southeast Asia. So the genres and the genre and the algorithms would start changing. So algorithms began optimizing for engagement and not well-being, okay, because the monetization aspect started. So when you're gaining money, when you're gaining something out of it, of course, then it becomes slowly and slowly exploitative, not for the well-being. What were the techniques? Personalized feed started acting as echo chambers. So if you see one video, citing communal hatred, citing hatred towards women or any other gender, LGBT sections actually, then you would start seeing more such videos which justify that violence, which justify that kind of discrimination. So of course, personalized feed started earlier. This was not happening over here. This started happening over here, echo chambers and all, right? And if you remember in 2014, 2015, 2014 election in India, when NDA came first to power after a long period of time after Congress, and there, it was said that, Narendra Modi won because of, the power of social media and all. So yes, all those echo chambers and personalized feed, and if you're starting to see some videos, you'll start seeing more such kind of videos, the works done, the good work done by the, the MPs and the MLAs, that kind of stuff. Then gamification of social approval. Then the aspect of likes, shares, and follows, all that started. Now, please understand, it was here also, but it was limited. Okay, I remember, in my college days, I think there was, whenever we used to go out, we would click a lot of pictures. And the first thing was, when we used to come back to the hostel, was not to change our clothes or see what we have shopped or what we have done. People would start opening their laptops and, and they would start uploading the photos. So this was, and it was limited because you wanted to show not to the world, but to maybe your, hostel mates or your batch mates that, okay, yes, Sunday we went to this, and a movie or so, we shopped so much and we clicked pictures and all that. And it was limited. Then later on, it was on a wide, now you want to showcase to world what you're doing. So it was a difference. Earlier it was very local and, like localized. Now it has started becoming that, your likes and following and all that, is happening on a global level. People want that if they're an influencer, they have, people following them from different regions. They feel very happy when they say, oh, I'm your fan and I'm a follower from, this country and all that. So it feels great that you're staying in India and, you're making some videos and it is reaching out to people of Europe or, people to different countries, African countries and whatnot. So it, gamification of social approval started over here, where it was not just about local likes and local friends, talking about what you have done, but yes, on a larger level, larger scale, you started doing this, right? Okay. I hope you're able to understand what picture I'm trying to paint. Then phase 3 was about the era of influence and surveillance. So from 2016 to 2020, now they understood the importance of social media. They understood that it's a serious game and they started playing around with it, right? So then surveillance and all that, okay, you could influence perception and monetize behavior. So now people, or I would say especially the people behind the social media platforms, they understood its power. They understood that how we can manipulate people, how we can influence, how we can, change the perception, how we can actually, subtly influence people to certain, you could say, ideologies and all. And you could also monetize that same kind of behavior and all, right? So rise of influencers as category, that, okay, you are an influencer. That means you could influence people. And it was being talked in a very positive sense that yes, I could influence you buying into some car, I could influence you buying into a camera, I could influence you buying from Myntra or from these kind of shopping sites. So that kind of influencer culture started developing in this phase 3, 2016 to 2020 onwards, right? And then you had a branding of identity and curated perfection. So now people start talking about how their page was looking like, it needs to be aesthetically pleasing. People started making videos using tools and techniques so that the video is very pleasing to look at, and all that you were curating things to to build a perfect life. That kind of things were there. And of course, you're developing your you're branding yourself as an influencer. You have your own brand, you have your saying, you have your opinion. If you're saying a product is wrong or it's bad, people are going to believe in it blindly. These kind of things started happening a lot. Then fake news, misinformation, filter bubbles, that kind of, again, from echo chambers to this kind of thing, all, it aggravated. Lives turned into highlight reels, right? So unrealistic comparison started, data harvesting, manipulation of consumer and voter behavior. If you remember, Cambridge Analytica and those kind of, controversies. So all of that, you could say started happening in this phase. Then in the phase 4, which is like 2020 post pandemic, or you could say pandemic onwards to the present, the age of disconnection and digital fatigue. Now we are tired of all this. Now we are tired of influencers. Now influencers are not influencing but de-influencing or pulling each other down. One influencer is trying to malign other influencer, and that's what is happening. And we are totally tired of seeing all this. We have developed a digital fatigue. There is constant visibility, and because people are banking upon that out of sight out of mind. And how it is said that if you want to develop more followers on YouTube or Instagram, you have to post daily, you have to post one reel per week, you have to post on a very regular and frequent basis, because out of sight out of mind, that kind of thing is happening over YouTube, that thing of happening is over Instagram. So all that is there, the constant visibility. You are focusing on attention economy, you're scaling it up. Then you are driven on short form dopamine, so all those short reels. Earlier YouTube had longer videos, so if you were interested into something, you had to devote at least 20, 25, 30 minutes of your time to see that. Okay, even if somebody was blogging their own personal life, you would be devoting 30 minutes. But nowadays, because of reels, because of shorts, the attention span has gone down for us, and now nobody is interested in watching long. Even I've seen in UPSC, many mentors, many faculties, they have started making short videos, because they understood, and they have started talking about it also, that how the attention is very less for the generation. So they don't make long form videos on YouTube, because they know that people are not going to watch them. So it's very difficult, because somebody is having, this attention, lack of attention, and this short form dopamine driven content, infinite, scroll, doom scrolling, all those, terminologies. Then you have info overload, which is also leading to a cognitive fatigue. You have a lot of information, like I'm telling you right now. Okay, Diwali is coming. There are reels flooding up my feed with how to do Diwali Pujan. I have been doing it for so many years. I have seen my mother doing it for so many years. I don't need a reel to tell me. It's, it's all glorification. It's all, buy this stuff, and now you want to worship Mother Lakshmi with, this particular thing. You have to have 5 different varieties of, mithai and sweets and all that to offer. So all that is, leading to consumer culture. All that is, and yes, I am influenced. I am not saying that I'm not influenced. I am influenced. Even I want to, buy a lot of stuff and, celebrate Diwali in such a way. And earlier our Diwalis used to be very simple, few things, of course, were essential. But now it's so complicated. And nowadays, we have forgotten how to celebrate Diwali. We are just asking each other, okay, what is the Muhurat? What is the way to celebrate? We have seen our mothers doing all the puja since childhood, and it's not that there's something unique and very, very, what do you call it? Very procedural about it. It's simple thing. But then everything has been so much complicated, and with every festival, be it Karwa Chauth, be it Raksha Bandhan, be it Christmas, every festival, when you've got Eid, you start getting those, non-veg vlogs and all that. Eid is coming, and how to make sevaiya, So it's not about, yes, celebration, Diwali, and, festivals and all that. Yes, it makes sense. But everything has been started, being too much in your face. It's being, it's like fatigue. It's generating literally, a fatigue that now you don't want to celebrate. You don't get the feeling of celebrating something. It's more like, following the trends. Okay, people have bought so many things for their Lakshmi Pujan. Let me also buy that. It's not about being simple and celebrating Diwali. Okay, so I hope you get the point. I'm sure you all are feeling that. So info, overload is there. Cognitive fatigue is there. Then you're hyper comparing. Their Lakshmi Pujan on reel was so beautiful, with so much, this and that, and so much of offerings, and mine is such a simple one. You get that kind of feeling, right? Hyper comparison, emotional emptiness, and of course loneliness. So these are the 4 phases. Now I did tell you But I'm reminding you again that these four phases, you don't have to be elaborative in your actual essay. You just need to summarize this into two paragraphs to just talk about the basic evolution, that how social media evolved as a good concept, evolved as a tool to connect people, to build communities, but now it has evolved into a something very different, you could say entity altogether, right? So then then we'll come to our second argument. What is FOMO and why it matters, and how social media creates FOMO, because our topic is having this keyword, so you can't ignore it, you have to discuss it. So your second argument would be, what is FOMO, what is fear of missing out, and why it matters, and how social media is creating that FOMO, because the topic expects us. So what is fear of missing out? It's pervasive apprehension that others are having rewarding experiences that you are missing, right? Others are, enjoying their life, they are enjoying their youth, their young days, they are having a different kind of clothes and different kind of gadgets, and their room is, so much aesthetically pleasing, all that is there. And then you are literally, living in a middle class with a room which is shared by other people and other siblings, and you've got no space and no privacy, that kind of concept. So it's good to have privacy. I'm just saying that, that's how that, apprehension is there. So others are having rewarding experiences that you are missing. It's linked to heavy social media use and greater anxiety, lower life satisfaction, and compulsive checking behavior. You keep on checking the social media, you keep on checking, okay, what this person is doing, what this person is doing, what is happening over there, what is happening in their life, what, new cafe or new spot has come out, what new hangout, which new movie, which, all those trends. And the weirdest trend, Labubu. Why? I am, I don't know. I still can't understand, frankly. Why Labubu? Why it was trending? Who is buying such kind of? I have no words. I mean, I really can't understand. I'm so sorry. You might feel that I belong to 18th century. I do, and I'm really happy to be in 18th century, but I don't understand the trend behind Labubus. So, yes. Okay, so this compulsive checking behavior and all that. I mean, I'm laughing. It's very weird for me, and of course, it's a serious topic, how as a society, how as person, we are actually progressing. So what it creates is that within the FOMO, you have to discuss all this. So how and why is, and what is happening. So of course, it is creating the feeling of relative deprivation. It's not deprivation actually. Maybe your parents are doing everything best, you have all the best things in your life, you've got the best education going on, you've got even, I would not say best clothes, but decent clothes. You have not just one or two pairs, you have decent number of pairs, you have decent number of shoes, you have decent number of gadgets and all, everything which is okay. But still, we are still in that comparison. So relative deprivation, other has iPhone, and nowadays people, it's not about iPhone, it's about new sorts of those flippable and all those closing phones. It's launched by Samsung and all. I don't even know the that particular brand name, but that's, I mean, okay. So relative deprivation, new gadgets, clothes, every post reel is at a new cafe, hangout, show off culture creates feeling of deprivation. So basically, you have to talk about relative deprivation, that it's not actual deprivation, it's perceived deprivation by checking, by when you're constantly checking your social media. So you're getting this feeling that you're missing out, because your friend has bought something, or this other person has started buying this, and then you don't have it, right? Then you have influencer culture. You see that influencers get PR kits and so much of freebies, and you see they follow some trends, and they are talking about something which is in vogue, which is in trend. Increased consumerism, right? If not able to keep up, creates feeling of scarcity and dullness. So when you see something is being followed as a trend, you also, because of that social approval, because of that validity, you also want to follow that trend. And of course, it's not possible, because trends, as the name suggests, is short term. It's not something that will be followed long term. So if you're just buying stuff just to follow a trend, and that trend is going to die down even before your next week is starting, that's really foolish. But this is what is happening with our with our youth. So influencer culture, all that is there. Then easy life, you get an a feeling that their life is easy, which is filled with joy and only high moments, because they tend to showcase that. They are maybe fighting depression, they are fighting divorce, maybe they are going through a divorce, they are going through a very conflicting period or challenging time, but they are just showing that, oh, my life is so beautiful, I just had my morning coffee and I'm so blessed and I'm grateful, I'm paying gratitude. And yes, it's good to have gratitude. It's just that everything has come out as artificial. You don't know what's real, because the same influencer after a month starts crying that she or he is going through some big challenges, and a lot of different kind of stuff was happening. They were going through all of a loss of a loved one. That's also, and you see that the reels keep coming, the posts keep coming, and then eventually they will reveal that yes, they were fighting this and their Nanaji expired and all that. So weird, right? So in a way, they are just putting out the highlights of their day. They're just putting on the high moments, and that creates a perception that everybody else is having an easy life and my life is only difficult. It happens, right? So that comparison is there. Social media whitewashes people's lives because only the highlights are shared, right? Nobody's even the vloggers who tend to vlog their daily life, they're of course not showing everything. So there are few genuine, I would say, vloggers, of course, who tend to, of course, talk about the real issues or the real stuff. But most of the times, it's always about get ready with me and spend a day out with me in gym and in Pilates on whatnot. Okay, so I'm not going to say about it. You already know. You have seen that. Social validation, likes, follows, comments, popular person, mass following. So through all of this is what is the fear of missing out. So relative deprivation, the influencer culture, all that is creating a feeling that you're missing out on life, that everybody is having a great life and you are having a life which is filled with challenges, where parents expect you to study. Nobody else is studying, nobody's working hard, but you are expected to study, you are expected to be disciplined, you are expected to stay committed to your studies and all. And that is what creates a false perception about society and other people's lives. So that is what is happening with us when we are using social media a lot. So for this, I've given you this: comparison is thief of joy. It's a very sweet short quote given by Roosevelt. You can use it. Okay, comparison is thief of joy, right? Then let's move on to our third argument. FOMO ultimately creates disconnection and isolation. So it's not just fear of missing out. Okay, it's not just some fear which you get momentarily, but then over the period of time, it starts developing that now you want to escape, because now you feel that other people are enjoying their life, other people having a good life, and you are literally having a very messed up life, a very difficult, challenging life. And because of that, now you want to escape. Now you don't want to talk to people. Now you don't want to create meaningful relationships, because you're always in a comparison state, what is happening with other people and what is happening in your life. And you're not able to accept that whatever is being shown is something which is superficial and artificial. So self-worth and self-confidence goes for toss. Comparison creates feelings of worthlessness, right? You start getting a feeling that my life is not good enough. I am not good enough because my life, because in a way you feel that my life is it's part of me. So because I am not good enough, I am not able to, I am not born into a family which is rich. I am not able to earn a lot of money, and that is why I am not good enough, and my life is not good enough. Good enough. So that kind of your feeling you start getting. And earlier the comparison was at neighborhood and school level. Now it's on global level. Now it's about following trends, even where in the trends are not being followed in your region. It's about now Indians, Labubu trend happening there. Okay, in other countries, Indians also falling for it, and they also start wanted to like showcase and all that they bought Labubu and all that. Real life connection and warmth through interactions, right? So that gets reduced, and it has been given a term also, fubbing, where you ignore real life, or sorry, it's like should be the entire sentence should be real life opportunity of interactions. So actually you're ignoring real life opportunity of interactions, but you're onto your phone, and that is called as fubbing. It's a midpoint between fear of missing out and depression. So this fubbing, because you start ignoring the opportunities of real life interactions, meaningful relationships. You're in your virtual world, you're caught up into that, the likes and disapprovals and approvals and trends and all that, and you're just caught up. So caught up in vicious loop of fear of missing out, more exposure, that means more exposure to social media, then more comparison, and then loneliness. And then doom scrolling also leads to brain rot, issues in sleep, and mental health declines. So actually mental health is not just declining, depression is not just happening because you're comparing yourself to others, but the actual clinical depression is happening because if you're not sleeping properly, you're awake in the night, doom scrolling, going through various reels and what other people are doing, and then you're harboring all those negative feelings and negative thoughts, and then that is leading to your physical health getting hampered because you're not sleeping on time, you're not giving your body rest, and of course that blue light of phones and smartphones, of course, it's quite impacting your physical health. And that, because if your lack of sleep, then all filled with negative thoughts, is leading to mental health issues. So, in a way, it's not that your fear of missing out will directly lead to depression. No, all of it coming together is creating a chain of events, a domino effect, where one thing is leading to another thing, and then ultimately you feel depressed and lonely, right? You feel that nobody's there to understand you, nobody's able to understand your challenges, because your life is so difficult, other people's life is so easy, all that. So issues in sleep and mental health declines, and that is how the fear of missing out, actually how it creates disconnection and isolation. You could actually create this kind of picture and understanding. Then the fourth part is that you need to bring in the discussion that the social media was brought in, we shape our tools and thereafter tools shape us. So that's your subheading for this. That means what? That we had brought in social media platforms for our benefit, because we wanted to connect, we wanted to we wanted to build community with like-minded people, we wanted to interact, we wanted to develop our perspective, multicultural perspective, because a person sitting in Africa is trying to know about Indian culture. So initially it was good, but then we shaped our tools, but now the tool has started shaping us, it has started shaping our behavior, it has started shaping our perceptions and belief system. So social media started off on a positive note, making the world a global village. People learned tolerance, they also learned appreciation of diverse cultures and viewpoints. But then and of course, issues of importance got recognition, social media backlashes, even saw discrimination, like the gender discrimination, hashtag Me Too, kind of movements, environmental issues, and even corruption. So it democratized voice, but like all major technology, it has transformed into double-edged sword. So we shaped our tools, we got all these benefits. So in a way, this argument is sort of your counter argument that social media is not just about everything wrong. It was started on a positive note. It was actually something which was really helping us in many ways. I have highlighted all the benefits that we were getting actually. But then now it has evolved into something just like every other technology, nuclear technology, other technologies. It has now developed into a double-edged sword where you have both benefits and demerits and merits. So societal ethics and morality must evolve as fast as technology. Then only you will be able to tackle such kind of technology and tackle its ill effects, or tackle the harm associated with usage of such kind of technology. So you need to always have this, that societal ethics and morality should always evolve faster, because technology it's evolving faster, it's an exponential curve, and because of it, what is happening is that you are not able to adapt to it, because your morality, your ethics is limited to the previous times, right, the previous years, and then things are happening. So the kind of influencer culture, you are not able to understand that as a society we don't need that, we don't need extra consumerism, we need to be judicious with our resources, we need to be careful with whatever benefits or things that we have. So in a way, especially in Indian society, we need to ensure that we're not creating avenues for increase in inequality, right? So all that is what you have to understand, and that is why societal ethics and morality must evolve as fast as technology. Okay, but you have to sort of, for this topic, you need to justify that social media was not an entirely bad thing, otherwise it would have not been able to sustain itself. It started off on a good note, but then its current format is something else. So now, to continue the same thing, what conclusion you could write? You could talk about the solution, because it is talking about social media as a problem. So of course, in conclusion, you have to give the way forward, you have to talk about the positive aspect, the solution oriented aspect of it. So what are the solutions? You can actually give it in a stakeholder format, stakeholder perspective. That means from the individual perspective, from the technical platforms, all those platforms who own social media, their responsibility is also there. The government's responsibility is there. You have even responsibility of family and society, right? Parenting and all that needs to be there. So stakeholder perspective, I have given few points from individual perspective. You can elaborate from all this stakeholder perspective. So you have, from individual perspective, mindful usage. That means you have to maintain digital hygiene. Don't wake up and start scrolling on your phone. Take your time, focus on self-care, focus on your own task, avoid usage of phone like for for something which is you can do on your own, like for calculations and all, right? Because it leads Like you picked up the phone for calculation, and then you went on to Instagram, then you went on to WhatsApp, and then you just, juggling between different apps. So mindful usage, digital minimalism, that means there's a concept of, Carl Newport, that you should follow digital minimalism. It's just a concept, just like minimalism as a concept is about, it goes against the concept of over consumerism. So simply, digital minimalism means that use only those apps which are, very relevant to you. So don't keep multiple apps lying there on your phone. Maybe use 1 to 2 apps, which is of course, the most important to you and according to your requirement. If you're into some calculation, of course you need the calculator. So that's how, you are going to minimize your usage and all. Then planned breaks in nature, plan digital detox, take time outs, turn the fear of missing out into joy of missing out, right? So all those, individual, you could say, ideas I have given. You could of course, bring in the responsibility of tech platforms. You can bring in responsibility of government, and you could also talk from the perspective of the family, society, the new age parenting. If you remember in the themes and essence in the initial first page itself, I discussed about the new age parenting concept, right? So that's there. Then technology should serve humanity and not enslave it. It's a quote which can be used. And then it's not social media that's harmful, it's our unexamined use of it. So actually we tend to start blaming the technology. It's always human nature to blame the technology. Actually, it's not the problem of social media, because social media, just like I told you, it was radio, it was TV, we had so many technologies like that. So it's not social media that's harmful, it's our own unexamined use of it. It's our own, uncontrolled, unregulated use of it. And this quote has been given by Carl Newport, who is, the author of Deep Work, and who has given the concept of digital minimalism also, right? So this is what you can write in your conclusion. For introduction, again, there are 2-3 ways in which you can write it. This topic is very contemporary, like social media is today's topic, right? But then you could, for introduction, you could relate it to one historical, you could say, anecdote or incident, where you could talk about the Emperor Nero. So the Roman Emperor Nero, okay, Nero. So what he did was that actually he was a bad emperor. That means, his actions led to the downfall of Roman Empire. So basically, he used recreational tactics to distract people from real issues. So when, the cities were burning, or the cities were actually, facing downfall, there was a lot of issues. The Roman Emperor Nero, he actually built large amphi theaters and large places of recreational, places, and to distract people, so that people get distracted, they put themselves out into for to enjoy themselves for recreation, and they are not tackling and discussing about the real issues which is bothering the empire, right? So that is what you could talk about, that this is, as an inference, you could talk that how social media is also distracting us from the real issues, and through these platforms, people are literally distracted from the real contemporary world issues right now, or the issues of importance. So when ancient Rome was crumbling under corruption and fire, Emperor Nero chose to play his lyre, like, he was playing some instrument, drowning reality in spectacle. 2 millennia later, we scroll, post and perform, while our inner worlds quietly burn. That means we scroll through the post and the reels, and the world is, burning down. So actually, we are very much disconnected with the present world, and that's what Emperor Nero had also done to the people of Rome, right? Then you have that was from the historical perspective. Please, now I've written it in short because of the lack of space. You could please develop the story. You could do a Google search, develop the story of Emperor Nero, what he did to distract people, and how even in the current, circumstances, we are also distracted. You could also use this reference for topics like propaganda, and how, you have yellow media, yellow journalism, those kind of things, like where the real issue is never discussed, but some stupid small issue is being picked up, and it was blown, out of proportion to distract people. Actually, that's how, it has been working. Then contemporary, you can bring in some data, some surveys, right, some reports. So 2024 global mental health report states nearly 42% of young adults report feelings of loneliness despite digitally connected for more than 4 hours per day. So, if you have some reports and some data, you can start with that also. Okay, that is also a very nice way of starting this particular topic. And then you could also, again, use newspaper headlines if you're good with, because in newspaper headlines, you get, people sometimes committing suicide because of, online gaming, losing money over online gaming. Then people, committing suicide because they were bullied online. some people, committing some crime because, they were comparing their life and all that. Like many instances are there. So through newspaper headlines, influencer committed suicide, young boy bullied for sexual orientation, all that. So you could bring in that how social media is now literally, not connecting people, literally disconnecting real people from other real people, right? And so all that is happening, and it's very, easy to be a keyboard warrior and not actually, come out on the real open to fight the issues. So through this, three types of introduction, you could actually introduce this topic. With this, I end the discussion. I hope you understood few ideas, but please understand that for the social media topic, you've got to collect some good data, some more quotes, some reports and surveys, and some experts' opinion also what they are saying about some new developments, some new regulations by government, some new, you could say, regulations by the tech platforms itself, who are the owners of these kind of social media apps. So you could bring all those examples and you could write a nice essay. Hope you learned something. And on this note, I wish you happy Diwali in advance, and study well. Don't just waste time in celebrating, but do celebrate whatever is possible for you. Even if you don't believe in celebrating, just take out time for yourself, enjoy, have some good food. Just enjoy your life and then get back to studies. Okay, don't break the momentum of studies. Don't take a very long break. Okay, so all the best and study well. And I'll see you next week. Take care. Bye bye.